We've started thinking that breathing is about relaxation or being calm, and that's not the case. It is fundamentally a performance mechanism. Our physiology is designed to breathe properly for high performance. When you breathe properly into your lungs with every breath, like we were designed to, frontal lobe is fully activated. Frontal lobe is where we make decisions, think critically, manage emotions, process information, and that shuts down, and our stress response, which we're all familiar with, that activates. Activation of our stress response causes panic, different thinking, narrowed attention. Change your breathing, change the lens on everything you do.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Ways to Wealth. Today I'm joined by Sarah from Take a Breath. Sarah, why don't you give us the TLDR on who you are and what you get up to?
Thanks, Charlie. What I get up to, that's a big question. Essentially, my work has been about realising the change in our breathing at a population level over the last couple of decades and the direct impact that's having on our health and capability for people who are, working at pace and living an everyday life in this era.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time looking at kind of obviously stressful environments and dealing with stressful environments as an entrepreneur myself and trying to work out techniques on how to kind of combat that. And, some of my favourite investors also are big kind of advocates for breath work and just really obviously grounding yourself and getting out of the forest when you're in fight or flight mode. So it's definitely something that now is becoming more of a real epidemic because all of the noise that we're being thrown at us through technology, ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that word you use, epidemic, is completely relevant here. One of the things that I discovered, my first piece of work was working in the law sector because it's a very highly stressed industry, and very quickly realised that the sorts of stats we're seeing in that environment are the same across all industries: farming, construction, law, health. Actually, there is no discrimination now. We're seeing that this shift in our breathing that's happened is epidemic, and it's causing many, many outcomes that we're not yet, I don't think we realise yet that those things are directly related to how we breathe. Even, no sleep, feeling stressed and rushed, worrying all the time, all things that are really relevant in our busy lives, but we don't know yet why that's related to our breathing. That's one of my big missions.
Yeah, for sure. That's really interesting. I often feel like the kind of modern day business operator, but also now kind of in a sense down to the employee level as well.
Oh yeah,
is in a big way is kind of do more.
Yes,
like you just need to do more.
That's right.
And I think that is super damaging, and actually may not be the case. But with AI and all of the demands and concerns and angst around the unknown and uncertainty, it's kind of really building on this kind of anxiety problem we have, and that is often,
that's right,
attributed to the breath you're taking.
Well, it is, except we don't know about that yet. It's this really invisible thing, I think, that has captured us and our attention. I mean, I bring my little brain with me almost everywhere I go, because one of the reasons being that people can think breathing is a bit flaky, or they can think what you're asking me just to take a couple of breaths and that's going to help me deal with all the challenges. So actually being able to explain that direct link between the way we breathe and what's going on in our brain and why that's causing this pressure is really pivotal.
Okay. What's going on then?
Okay, well, essentially, the first thing to understand is that the way you breathe is designed to govern this performance factor.
Okay.
We are designed to breathe fully into our lungs, so with every breath. So you also mentioned earlier about techniques, and that's a terminology that I shift away from, because I want this understanding at a macro level to be, it's not about techniques or things we do occasionally to mitigate pressure.
It's how we breathe constantly.
100%. It's about us realising the way the human body was designed. Our physiology is designed to breathe properly for high performance. Whereas we've started thinking that breathing is about relaxation or being calm, and that's not the case. It will help us ground, but it is fundamentally a performance mechanism. So when you breathe properly into your lungs with every breath, like we were designed to, like you used to, we were all born breathing properly, frontal lobe is fully activated. Frontal lobe is where we make decisions, think critically, manage emotions, process information, and that shuts down, and our stress response, which we're all familiar with, that activates. Activation of our stress response causes panic, different thinking, narrowed attention, all these things that are contributing to a sense of rush, unable to manage competing demands, and we start to question ourselves. And I think that's where there's become a little bit of a misdiagnosis, if you like, where people start to question themselves. Gosh, am I not capable anymore? What's wrong with me? I'm not coping. And it's not actually that we've lessened our capacity or our capability. It's literally that this part of our brain switches off when we don't breathe properly.
Right.
So understanding that first is a really fundamental part, because change your breathing, change the lens on everything you do.
Yeah.
Was we're trying to just cope with everything we do with compromised brains. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it totally makes sense. And something that I spent a bit of time, thinking about, not to any sort of depth of, obviously your experience.
Yes.
But just intuitively, and also intuitively knowing that health issues that I've had have impacted that.
Yeah.
Because I've always had like hay fever.
Right.
And hay fever makes it harder to breathe because you're constantly just like
blocked up.
So it's kind of something I know exists.
Yeah.
And I think, like you say, a lot of people don't really associate it with like brain functionality. No. They might associate it with, you're anxious and you might have a response to like, when I was about to have my first child, I ended up having heart palpitations because I was doing shallow breathing.
Right. And how is the poor mum going with that?
She was like...
You were having palpitations. She's in labour.
She wasn't in labour at the time. It was before that.
Yeah.
It was because we were quite young.
Yes.
So I was quite... Right. I went through a very, a real pivotal transformation in how I thought about the world and, what I was trying to achieve.
Interesting.
But as a part of that, then, I was, shallow breathing.
Yes.
So that was very interesting. That was my first experience with breath.
Right.
And then obviously, but I was like 21 and had no real responsibility yet. And, hadn't really been through actual stress.
Yes.
And then obviously now having built a business, sold a business, now building this business, and this business has obviously got a lot of dynamics to it. So, the whole learning through that whole experience has been really interesting.
Yes.
And then reading books about, how to kind of, how to manage it when you're in a situation where you might just actually not be breathing correctly at that moment, right? Well, or actually maybe for an extended period of time.
Well,
it's like posture, perhaps.
100%. And on that, what we know now is over the last 2 decades, again, as I say, at a population level, our breathing has changed. So we know statistically that over 90% of us aren't breathing properly anymore. That has a massive impact on how we engage with the pressures of our life. So every pressure that we experience is experienced through our nervous system. So that's kind of like our lens on what we're dealing with. And if you're not breathing properly, our nervous system is dysregulated.
Yeah.
So that adds a whole nother layer of pressure to the stresses that we are all experiencing. And I think one of the things that we can hang some hope on is that typically we've looked at all of our pressures. And when we're under those constraints, we're constantly thinking about how do I manage those things better or differently. Whereas if the first thing we do is how do I regulate my stress response and my nervous system, that's the first thing we can do. We've got complete control over that. And then we start to see a flow-on effect of how a regulated nervous system and body handles those pressures far more effectively. It is really interesting. I think that is one of the key things that we haven't understood, to your point around the science of this. And when I first started working, because my mission has been for this to be understood by as many people as possible.
Yeah.
So my business model in the beginning was I'm going to partner with large corporations in New Zealand so we could reach thousands of people at a time with our software and our information. And I was really fortunate that Spark was one of my first partners, and we took an approach of let's go to the cynics, because we know there's cynics when it comes to breathing a solution and being taken seriously because they don't know yet about how it works. So we were right inside there talking to their law teams, engineering, technology, finance, and sector by sector, we were just getting this response that said, wow, I had no idea that's how breathing affects my body and thereby my output and my work.
Yeah.
So it's a really new and exciting space. And what's great is I think we're going to be able to start seeing some real autonomy and, is that the word I'm looking for, agency around us being able to control things that we just didn't think we had control of before now.
Yeah, I like that you have had a breakthrough through those different niches of kind of, I guess, personality ultimately in the organisation that may have a different view or may be unaware, but then see an instant response. And the great thing about breathing properly is that if you do start breathing properly, you almost immediately notice the difference.
You do.
It's like you go into high definition in your actual perception of your surroundings.
Well, and that you've actually probably just described accidentally a piece of science. So when you describe high definition, it means we're seeing things properly. We've engaged all aspects of our capability and skill sets because we breathe properly, and that literally engages that part of our brain to work. When that part of our brain isn't working, we are in very low definition. We literally probably, I'm literally throwing around stats here, but I would suspect that many of us are only operating at about 50 to 60% capacity in this era.
Yeah.
And so just to continue a little bit about what you were talking about, breathing properly, what we haven't understood is that when we don't breathe properly, and by that I mean we shallow breathe or hold our breath, that shallow breath that we take, that over 90% of us are taking, is literally designed to activate the human stress response.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really interesting thing for me to learn. I know that when we breathe properly, we regulate, but I didn't know that when we don't breathe properly, we're literally turning our brain into a stressed mechanism. And that completely changes how we approach things.
Yeah, so there's two things, right? There's like consciously partaking in doing breathing.
Yes.
Right, which is like I'm consciously thinking about it, so I know that I'm doing it. And then there's obviously a day-to-day living.
Yeah.
So, and you kind of seem to have quite a focus on this latter.
I do.
So how does someone, reteach themselves how to breathe?
Yeah. Great question. And before I answer that one, I'll just answer the comment that you made prior to that, which is that we can be consciously thinking about our breathing.
Yeah.
The idea about the way we're supposed to breathe is it's part of our autonomic nervous system. So we're not actually designed to think about our breathing. It's supposed to just happen properly and automatically. Right. But in this era, it's not happening properly. But because we're not consciously aware of it, now our breathing has come up into our chest, and that pattern is what's happening automatically. So the human body in this era is held in that pressure state. So to come back to your second question, which was how do you change that? Actually, very simply. It's simple, but it's not easy and that you won't remember. So first what you have to do is actually realise and what proper breathing feels like. So if you put your hands on your tummy just while we're sitting here and you take a breath, it's your tummy that should move.
Right.
But almost every person you ask, just take a nice deep breath, their chest will move.
Yeah.
That's what we've become accustomed to. A chest breath signals to your brain and body that you're not breathing properly, that you shouldn't be at ease and functioning as you're designed to, but it's also an indicator to you that you're not breathing properly. So part of what my software was about creating a breathe trainer. So I put it in an app, and I always do a little inside eye roll at that because part of the thing around the pressure that society is under is this constant attachment to devices and technology, always on, no downtime anymore. However, we have to meet people where they are, and so a technology-driven device was the best thing that we could create. And in answer to that question, you need to just signal to your body multiple times a day to take a proper breath.
Right.
So we've got this trainer that will prompt you to take a proper breath into your tummy. You don't stop what you're doing. You could be on a call, in a meeting.
So it's like a push notification.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So and it's based on timings?
Yes, it's based on timing. So you set an interval. My recommendation is 30 minutes, which can sound like a lot. And to begin with, people can be like, oh, gosh, there's my take a breath trainer again.
Yeah.
But this is what is needed to reset poor breathing patterns. And because your brain does work in patterns, literally within a few days, your brain starts to recognise this corrected pattern. And I'm going to say corrected pattern because this is nothing new for humans. You're born breathing properly. You were breathing properly up until a point in life where the pressure started to come on. So at my age now, pressure didn't really come on till a couple of decades ago because the way we live and work has changed. But we are seeing children as young as 6 now presenting with anxiety state, like subclinical anxiety state conditions, and that's concerning because we're setting that little body up for a life of pressure until that little body learns how to regulate again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So it's one of the simplest things that we literally have to reset our breathing, experience what that feels like, and then turn back to the pressures of business and life and family and growth and all of those things that we thought were placing the weight on us. But when we approach it again from a regulated, positive position, we experience that stuff differently. We've got some amazing data that we've pulled out on exactly that, which we can chat about when the time's right.
Yeah, for sure. That is really interesting. So you were mentioning that, how you got into the space and what kind of led there.
Yes.
You said that you kind of started working with a law firm and that really opened your eyes, but was it before that that you really...
It was actually. So I was actually speaking at a conference, nothing to do with breathing and performance. It was about living well in an industry of pressure. And I think back in those days, this was some years ago now, many conferences were inviting me to participate because they thought that I'd lighten up the day. We'd talk about wellness and very good, and all of the hard, real stuff supposedly was done during the day or in the preceding days. But in this particular case, I did my session, I got off stage, I was on the plane on the way home, and one of the delegates happened to be sitting next to me just by chance.
Right.
And just a passing comment from him, he said, every person in that room you spoke to today, and there were 350 lawyers in the room, knows someone who ended their life because of stress. And that really struck me. I mean, we know the stats, don't we, about that industry and what is going on in terms of the high degree of pressure. But when he said it, I was like, hold on, I can't just hear these stats any longer and continue to do what I'm doing. So, yes, I did stop my work and I down-tooled in a mission to try and help the law industry. But very quickly I realised we're seeing the same sort of stats in farming, construction, health, and like I said, children as well. So I had this question, which was, if you look at all of the people in those sectors they all live and work very differently, yet we're seeing the same sorts of stats as an outcome. So what's common? That was my question. What's the same between all of these people?
Right.
That's where I landed on the human brain and looking at, my question became, what happens to a human brain under pressure over time and why?
Yeah.
So went up to Berkeley University, California, worked with a neuroscientist up there who was dedicated solely to understanding stress in the brain. Then drew the link between the work she does, which is about understanding the stress response and the way humans were designed to breathe, and realised there's a massive breakdown right in the middle. We're trying to regulate a nervous system, and yet we don't breathe properly anymore. That's the missing link. And so following that, there was a lot of really interesting testing to discover that, how the difference it makes when we breathe properly at scale. I was really curious to understand it at a subclinical level, because we know the stats when we put a person under pressure in this sort of situation and help them breathe properly. But when you go into large organisations like Microsoft or the Warehouse Group and take hundreds of people at a time and do this testing and see the outcomes that we got, we realise that there's a big change required here.
Yeah. And how are employers that you're working with actually getting into actioning that outside of the workshops you do? Like, is there a program of work?
That's a great question, yes, because before I designed any of this, my question was always, how do we reach those people and how do we make it not just something that they hear me talk about, that they actually action?
Yeah.
That's why we created this little piece of software that built into the app. But a lot of the work that I've had to design is, because we do it inside large organisations, is about campaigns that build awareness, create engagement and trial. We create little challenges within the workplace for people to actually experience breathing properly while they work and then measure the changes. And that was probably one of my key drivers, being able to help them make these changes while they're working. Because that's the biggest pressure everyone has. They haven't got time to do a lot of things, let alone another piece of work that someone might be giving them to do.
Right, as in like, here's homework.
Yeah, no one wants to do that.
No one wants to do homework.
No, and we don't need to do homework. And that's one of the other things, is that if we can literally breathe properly while we work, we see and feel change.
Yeah.
We very much start to protect our state once we feel what breathing properly is like.
Yeah.
It's a game changer.
I would be interested to understand the difference between about 2017 and today in terms of an increase of trajectory of this problem.
Yes.
Because I would say that it's directly correlated to device habit.
Yes.
Because I remember 2017, not everyone was attached to their phone and they were more attached to either other devices and less frequent.
Yeah.
And now obviously the usage patterns have gone much more. And I genuinely think, and unfortunately, because I get enjoyment out of them, but I think short form content is a big proponent to this issue.
It's how we consume it, I think, because short-term content is really amazing. And I think we've got to really balance the excellent insight and information and things we can get through this platform or this channel, but we have to be quite deliberate about how we consume it.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's what's changed, is we're literally addicted.
Yeah, I mean, and like I get my algorithm's really good at appealing to content to me, which would be seemingly quite wholesome, good content about, achieving and business and stuff like that. But actually, I only need to hear that once.
Yeah.
If I listen to the same message and re-edited 15 times in half an hour or in a 15-minute period, then like all I'm really doing is giving myself sugar.
That's exactly what you're doing. You're giving yourself sugar. But the other interesting part of that is it's not necessarily about what we're consuming. And 10 years ago, that was a real factor. We were wanting to limit our young girls consuming this information because body image issues, or our young boys and what they might be accessing on the internet and how that was affecting all sorts of things. But what we know is even more important now is it's not necessarily about what we're consuming. It's what is happening in your brain and body when you're consuming.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is when a body and brain is in downtime, and that doesn't mean lying down necessarily or, taking complete time out. That can just mean kind of in chill flow mode. When we're in that mode, your brain is doing a really comprehensive set of work that gives you a sense of identity, purpose, creativity, innovation, all of these things that the brain is exceptional at. And it can't do that job when we're constantly on our devices. So probably a more succinct way of saying that is one of the main reasons to not be on our phones is so that your brain can do its job when it's in downtime. And that's a really major factor in this era. Always on.
Yeah, for sure. Have you heard of the book Deep Work?
No.
No, it's really good. It's like Cal Newport.
I must look at that.
It's really helpful because being able to do deep work is a muscle.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it kind of teaches you on how to start doing deep work from, I guess a default might be 10 minutes, right? In a bad case, right? If someone's like not well trained in it. And, the sweet spot is probably about 90 minutes to 2 hours.
Yeah.
And, that book kind of teaches you, explains how to do deep work.
Interesting.
And the whole kind of, obviously context switching is not great.
But it's part of this era. So we have to be able to manage that, don't we?
That's right.
Yeah.
And how do you manage it? How do you put yourself in a situation, which I think is quite pertinent because it was more about how does a knowledge work and it's not encumbered by the phone, but encumbered by other emails and distractions and meetings and stuff. How do they reliably and regularly go and do the work? And then that's kind of connected to this other book I love, which is the War of Art. It's a 2-hour read. That's really better.
Yeah.
Not better. I mean, one's a 13-hour read. The other one's about a 2-hour read.
Right.
But they're the same thing, which is that, this guy, the War of Art, is all about how artists, which could be an entrepreneur, could be a, athlete, could be, anyone that's trying to do exceptional work. They never they never finish it. Like we were talking about before the podcast about how we've got all this content, but we don't really release it.
Yes.
Same thing. And it's all about sitting down and, you don't care if you don't do the best work you've ever done, but because they've built in that regime.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing as deep work, but in a more kind of philosophical way rather than, I think, deep work is much more pragmatic, I guess, and like very in-depth in like techniques on how to achieve deep work, whereas this other book is more accessible and kind of more about like what are the resulting, what's the result of not doing deep work.
Oh, yeah. And I think that, again, going back to, you say 2017, and it could even be earlier, is we didn't necessarily have to train our brains for deep work because they already are. We are designed to do exceptional, great work. But as you say, all these competing demands have come into play now. But if we were living in a different era, that stuff would just happen naturally. So it's literally about understanding how does the brain function if it has moments of downtime? And if we can't even get that, how does the brain function if we breathe properly? So the breathing used to happen automatically. And now we've got this brain that's trying to do deep work. It's trying to do other things. It's not breathing properly. There's no way that's going to happen. So breathing properly is that switch, I think, that puts your brain in the right state. And then you can set about wanting to do the deep work. I often say that there are so many wonderful resources and learnings that we have access to about how to be our best and perform at our best. But if we're not regulated, which means we're not breathing properly, none of those things will be properly applied. We just can't. So it's the first step. Regulate, and when I say that, I mean that's literally switching your brain into performance mode. Because another thing too, we're talking about this industry that you and I both love, of entrepreneurs and disruption and thought leadership, and most people who are in those businesses are very passionate about what they do. So if someone's going to come in and say, well, you might be passionate about that and working all these hours and doing all these things, you need to stop or slow down. We don't want to. We want to do this stuff, but And we probably can for a few years maintain that pace, but we're going to be far better equipped to do that when we breathe properly.
Yeah.
At the same time, it does sound so simple, doesn't it? But I would guarantee you that if we took a challenge and took an entrepreneur that did this work and one that didn't, we'd be seeing a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of intuitively started thinking about it when Charlie Munger, who's a great investor, was talking about how cash flow is oxygen for a business.
Cool. Love
and we have, we've actually built tools to help our own group manage cash flow and stuff, and it's obviously a very important part of what we think about.
Yeah.
Cash flow is one of the biggest issues that SMEs face. Over 70% of SMEs are actually cash flow stressed.
Yes.
And obviously startups, when you're innovating and when you're in the the early stages of going from 0 to 1, you are in basically just burning cash.
100%.
But that kind of started getting me thinking about oxygen, right? And we have this whole oxygen thing. But then it kind of made me think about, obviously, well, what is keeping you alive? But beyond that, like, the more oxygen you have, the better off you are. And then, and that's kind of where I'm like, oh, well, it makes complete sense that the more oxygen I can get to my brain, the better off I'll be.
And that is exactly right. So oxygenation is a key factor, but also that function, again, that physiological mechanism of the way you breathe, switching on and off your stress response. That's a major. I mean, and they sit hand in hand. But your point, just going back, about 70% of small business owners struggling with cash flow. I know, having been a small business myself, the pressure that places on us, the wakefulness, the stress about that. And so this is another opportunity, I think, for businesses, people in these businesses to experiment with. We can't necessarily change those pressures and those stresses overnight, or sometimes it's going to be a period of time. So we have to look at the next best thing, which is better preparing ourselves to manage those stresses from a physiological point of view. And I really know, and I say this with huge regard, because it could sound like I didn't know what I was talking about, to say, well, don't worry about your cash flow, just breathe. It sounds a bit flaky, but again, try it. Get your body in that state and then realise what that does to how you deal with that pressure. You're either better able to go through that phase because you're not feeling so wound out. You might even be feeling better cognition around problem solving that, or bringing a different approach to it. But my personal experience and the data that we've collected from these people suggests you will feel different when you do this and perform differently.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, and so, you've been working on this for a while. You've got some good clients.
Yeah.
What does success look like for you, and what you're, the bigger you, not because you're not just your business.
No, that's a really great question, and it's quite timely, because I've actually just had a bit of a review of exactly that. Because when I started Take a Breath, my mission was for everybody to understand the way we breathe is challenged right now, and the difference it will make to how you live. So I was wanting to create impact at scale, which is why I chose large corporations to be my business partners in this. And so I've been working with large companies. We work with their employees. We also have a model where we gift out to all of their friends and family, so that we're having that social impact perspective. But what I realised when I came to the end of last year is that I've actually accidentally turned myself into a supplier to corporates of employee solutions, which is great, and I love it, but it's detracted me from this bigger mission around the world and breathing. So my next phase is about partnership, joint venture, whatever it might look like, with an organisation that can take on that channel of corporations. They potentially have hundreds of corporates as their clients, and so my work that I've designed can be channeled through them. And then I'm going to move back to a more centralised focus on meeting people where they breathe. So airlines, thousands, millions of passengers a year, who are anxious flyers or who are captive that we can talk about breathing to, contact centres. One of the most stressed customer-facing roles in the workforce doesn't have access to information and learning on how to be well while they work. So writing books, I've just signed a book deal to write my next book, coming on podcasts like this. The conversation is going to continue until we can recognise breathing as a new health metric.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, cool. And what would you say your biggest challenge is right now?
My challenge has been cash flow. Right. Cash flow because, that's probably just a carry on from the first few years when I started this, because it's a technology company. But yeah, cash flow has been hard. Human resource, human capital, because I was doing a lot of it myself in the beginning. Hence why now this partnership approach will help scalability.
So distribution and allowing you to really thrive in the area that you want to thrive in.
That's right.
But also that will bring, longevity to the other side too.
Yes.
So it's a hand-in-hand approach.
Yeah, it really is.
I think it's quite interesting that you also focus very heavily on where you want to go, because obviously once you've invested a lot of time and effort and resources into something, and the commercial side of it makes sense, and you've already invested a lot of time, it would be very tempting for someone to go, I really believe in this breath side, but I'm actually just going to keep grinding on the other side.
No, I know. Well, you're right. And so that was where I think coming back to purpose and my mission, it's re-inspired me, it's re-energized me. I know that the infrastructure of a potential partner in this is going to be way more better set up than I've got to scale it, because I want scale. I think every corporation in the world needs its people to understand the relationship between breathing and high performance. So someone else can scale that. I can provide the IP and all of that sort of thing. And for me, coming back to purpose and speaking at events again and on podcasts, as I've said, and just getting the message out there for people to realise that breathing isn't just about meditation and mindfulness and all those things and breath work that they instantly think of. It's literally about the human body performing at its best, like it used to a couple of decades ago. And we don't anymore.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the pod. I really appreciate it.
I love chatting about it, so I really appreciate the invitation. It's been great to talk to you, Charlie.
Thanks so much.